Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm just going to wait a few minutes just to let any last minute participants filter in. And just a quick plug to please feel free with any questions you have throughout the session, please feel free to toss them in at the bottom. There is a Q&A tab. Feel free to ask away at any point throughout the session, and we will do our best to address all of them at the end. I wish we could have like waiting room music or something.
Right. I learned how to do that recently.
Oh,
Learning
yeah.
all the Zoom technology is very complicated.
There's something new every day.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Satya Godapalli. I am a demand generation manager here at Quorum. And I'm so excited to be joined by Diana Rhodes. She is the Vice President of Policy, Partnerships, and Organizing at Advocates for Youth, for our panel, How to Connect with Students and Gen Z Advocates. Diana, you should know, in preparation for our session today, I have spent the past 24 hours watching TikToks and doing nothing else.
There we go. That's the entire session, actually. Just get on TikTok for Gen Z.
Our favorite TikToks. I'm going to turn the floor over to Diana to introduce herself to the group.
Great. Thank you so much, Satya. And thank you for Quorum for having me. Again, my name is Diana Rhodes. I am Vice President of Policy, Partnerships, and Organizing at Advocates for Youth. We are a national organization, reproductive and sexual health and rights organization that centers the needs, voices, and activism of young people.
Awesome. We are so excited to have you here. We only have 30 minutes, so let's jump right into it. So you obviously work a lot with younger advocates, students, and people who really care about these kinds of stuff. How have you seen success kind of engaging and mobilizing with the younger Gen Z Zoomer advocates that you're working with? What are some of the strategies that you have the most success with?
Yeah. So, and just by way of background, the young people that we engage and work with are ages 15 to 24, so high school and college age. It's funny because I've been working at Advocates for Youth about 8 years, but my career has been in youth leadership development and policy advocacy work my entire career. And I remember like years ago, everyone was like, "Oh, the millennials," and I'm an older millennial, but I remember always saying like, we can't just keep using the generation terms because like our audience stays the same age, but they eventually get older. So now we're with Gen Z, we engage young people through a wide kind of variety, through education and mobilization, and also strategically using our digital platforms to engage young people. I might just kind of give some examples about our internal strategies that might be helpful. So, our youth activist network is, we have a very strong youth activist network, and it's youth leaders that are organizing across the country, and our youth organizing staff works very closely with. So we mobilize young people through a number of different culture shift and policy shift campaigns that center on a wide range of issues that impact their lives. Kind of our core issue areas are, reproductive and sexual health and rights related, sex ed, contraception, LGBT health and rights, et cetera, but also issues that impact their lives, right? Young people are the experts in their own lives. And so we really also listen to the young people we work with and ensure that the work that we're doing is relevant to what they're experiencing, right? So just kind of like to back up a little bit, we use kind of a wide and deep strategy in engaging with young people and in advocacy. So like wide is like culture shift, placing stories that shift the conversation about young people and activism in kind of larger platforms. So that's kind of your traditional media work, right? We, play stories, we share resources, and we're working to shift the conversation and having our young people engage in that. But for our mobilization work, and I think those who are joining this webinar or session who have kind of a grassroots base, we talk a lot about our ladder of engagement, right? You want to engage people, you want to get people through the ladder of engagement. And so, for instance, we have a partnership with Trojan Condoms called the Condom Collective, where young people apply to be a part of it and then do outreach work on their campuses to ensure that their peers have access to free condoms. So Trojan sends these young people a box of 500 free condoms, and these young people are in every state in the country on 1,000 college campuses, and they use social media to share stories about their safer sex events on campus or creative ways to give out condoms on campus, like they're RAs, or they do like condom fashion shows or creative ways to talk about safer sex, right? There was a trend for a little while that was like unboxing. I think there's still unboxing trends, but like, so we had young people on their TikTok and on their Instagram stories, like do unboxing videos of like opening a box of like 500 condoms, and then like tagging advocates and Trojan condoms, and then like, ways to like get free condoms on their college campuses or in their dorms, right? So these young people join our network, but they're not connected to staff in a really deep way. But then we can move them up further, the engagement ladder, right? So we almost have a second tier of our base that are then, we can hit them with participating in webinars, signing petitions, receiving emails about our campaigns, engaging on social media. So that's kind of like those who are liking or reacting or sharing our content or following our content. And then we have a core group of youth leaders who are directly a part of our youth organizing programs or our youth leadership councils that are deepest levels engagements. And these young people are connected to staff that worked with them throughout the year to build out campaigns in their communities. They receive direct training, technical assistance, tools, and like direct resources and support for their campaigns. So we have kind of, we try to be strategic in all of our engagement efforts on kind of where we're targeting the ladder of engagement. Are we doing a wide, sign a petition, just interact, just click and do an action, or are we trying to like really build out deep investment in kind of specific youth leaders, or just trying to give you to like interact with our social media, right? So there's various ways that we engage with our young people through a ladder of engagement.
That's really awesome. Yeah. And I love kind of that idea of sort of starting as maybe, a campus ambassador and then moving up this ladder. And, to your point, nobody knows about young people's lives better than the young people. And so it's sort of twofold, right? Where you get involved and you're moving up the ladder, but then also it's the young people who are reaching out to other young people who are kind of getting them in the know about all of this.
Yeah, exactly. And, you just touched on something that I think is really important, especially as, especially as social media is now such a tool to engage people, and especially young people. Where are young people at? They're on social, right? On certain social media platforms. And so also, knowing who your audience is on different platforms. I will be the first to say I'm not the digital strategist of the organization, but I do know kind of when we have our, kind of the strategies there. So different platforms have different age audiences, right? Like, and different content is shared. But I think the key is what you mentioned is that, young people engage with other young people, just like I am probably more likely to listen to my trusted friend than like something I don't know, right? And so for us as an organization, while we create amazing content, we also enlist and have our young people share that content or write their own content sharing our stuff, right? So, you get higher reach when people themselves are sharing or retweeting or creating the content about that topic rather than the organization, rather than just like the organization's content. Young people are listen more to their peers and their trusted network than like a stodgy organization in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. That's awesome. So I'm curious, you mentioned there is a lot of, on-campus ambassadorship, things like that. Obviously, that's not something that people have the opportunity to do right now. So how has Advocates kind of shifted strategy for engaging during the coronavirus?
Yeah, well, I mean, probably like everyone, everything's online now, right? Uh, yeah, everything is virtual these days. And I will say that, when COVID first hit, we were like, it was like, right. So someone who works with young people and also Congress, I think in congressional sessions, legislative sessions, and semesters as far as time. So we were hitting that point in the semester when we were just about to do a bunch of travel, we do regional trainings and campus events. We send our activists like activism in a box kits, basically, like banners and flyers and swag and things like that to help them with their campaigns. Obviously, all of that had to stop. And so we really kind of shifted gears, and obviously we shifted to more virtual programming, including, trainings on Zoom, and we did some, trivia events to kind of to get people involved, but also things were really difficult. So we also tried to like have our virtual programming not be so like there were things that were relevant on the issues and what was going on in their lives. And then we would end the week with like a trivia event. If you came to all the trainings, like, you might win a prize or something like that. We had like sex education trivia and things like that. But we shifted all of our original trainings to like a spring semester of at-home activism, and then had a calendar of trainings and events facilitated by our staff, by other young people, and by colleague organizations on various different issues. And I will say, between COVID and the uprisings, we really had to kind of switch gears, but also be like humble and listen to our staff, what our staff was going through, what our young people were going through, and provide content that would be relevant to their lives, right? And so we did a protest series training. We talked about how to create mutual aid in your communities. We talked about, how do you engage in protests safely, and what your rights are. We might have had trainings on the books to talk about birth control or other types of activism on campus, but we realized we needed to shift gears to meet where our young people were at, where all young people were at, which was in the streets. We also did, a virtual conference that we normally have in person in Washington for 4 days, where we end with a lobby day, right? Stay at the Washington Court Hotel, walk over to the Hill, have 150 young people meet with their representatives. But we did that all virtually this year. We had to really think strategically about, and I always say this to our staff, but also to other folks who are trying to figure out ways to do virtual programming. Like, it's not about doing the thing that you do in person and just transferring it to online, right? Like, you can't, there's only so much time you can sit in front of a computer. There's only so much you can just like listen, right? And so we do, the conference was still 4 days, but it was in small chunks. And I think what's important is to create, ample opportunities for participation. So even if it is a 2-hour session, that is broken up with breakout rooms, with, it's time to participate and get to know each other. And in a time where young people and everyone is feeling quite isolated, even a virtual space where you can find connections with other people like you. And I assume that many people who are at the summit do a lot of legislative advocacy. We did a whole lobby day. I made with 150 young people, and what we did is do phone banking, essentially, where we did a training, and then people broke up into rooms and they called their representatives, but they did it together. And I think that was something that's been interesting that we've been doing more and more of, is like national call-in days, like to the Senate right now, for instance, or lobbying on different bills, it'd be, us, 30 of us in a room on Zoom with the script, prepping our remarks, prepping, getting ready, psyching each other up, recognizing that making phone calls is weird. That's another thing about Gen Z and millennials. Making calls is weird. People don't talk on the phone anymore. That's more stressful than like an in-person meeting half the time. So just really like being, honest about how all of this is weird. But our virtual lobby days and our kind of phone banking days, even if it's just like getting together on Zoom and making calls, like I can see you and I'm like hyping you up and supporting you in calling Ted Cruz's office or whoever about whatever issues it is. I feel like that has worked really well as well as far as our kind of direct lobbying advocacy with young people.
That's so awesome. I can definitely attest to the fact that I hate talking on the phone. It takes me the duration of a phone call to hype myself up to be able to talk on the phone.
Exactly. And I think it's just acknowledging that, right? I was in a room with like 20 young people and I was like, listen, I'm stressed out about making phone calls too. Okay. Like, this is weird. We don't make calls anymore. I see a phone ring and I'm like, I don't know. Why are they calling me? Like, just being honest and authentic about that. And then, kind of hyping each other up to do it.
Kind of to that point, have you guys done any work with text banking?
We have done some text banking. Text banking. I think our digital team has done more of that. And I think it's a great way to engage and it's like super easy. So I think as far as like numbers, text banking is great. What we were finding, especially with the young people we worked with, that like there was the added layer of community building was something that our staff really wanted to do, and our youth activists felt really connected with us on. So having a weird, even just like Zoom face to face has been helpful, and using obviously Quorum and whatnot to like create member profiles to access all the information and then like display it on the screen so people can text or call, things like that has been really helpful as well.
That's really cool. That's awesome. So what are some recommendations that you would make? I guess this is kind of twofold for both for organizations who want to increase their engagement with younger advocates, but also just some of these strategies that other organizations can replicate, not just for younger advocates.
Yeah. So, I mean, your, reference earlier to TikTok, right? Like there's one aspect of, regardless of your audience, of meeting people where they're at. And any good advocacy organization knows that, right? You want to meet people where they're at. And for us, we work with young people. And so, our social media platforms, we try to stay relevant, and a lot of our staff are younger. And so I'm like, I know about some TikTok trends, but not all, right? And so they're like, hopping on when there's like a trend or something to work with. But I think the key is being authentic. Being authentic with your engagement and your relationships with young people. It's this funny thing. Youth is this weird construct where like everybody was young. Everybody was like a college age, everyone was 19, like as we get older, we were all once this person that we're all talking about and trying to figure out how to engage. And yet it's like we just forget what the lived reality is, right? Of that experience. Young people are experts on their own lives. Young people are incredible and have been the forefront of movements, most social movements around the world. And so, and also young people and anybody knows when an organization is not being authentic with them, right? So when we talk about youth, I think about when you were young and you were in your like DARE program or something, or a program where adults were trying to seem cool and like taking the youth things and like whatever it was, young people can see right through that, much like the experience of a substitute teacher in the high school classroom has been the same regardless of generation, because that doesn't change. And so I think the biggest thing is being authentic and meeting young people where they're at, not talking over, but talking with, working alongside young people, creating space for them to share their experiences and stories, not telling them what their experience is. And another piece that I forgot to mention, and this is engaging anybody in advocacy, I think, is that we also, provide stipends and honorariums to our young people that work closely with us. So if we are, having someone share their story for a media piece about their experience with sex education or their abortion experience, or they're creating content for our channels, we make sure to provide a stipend or an honorarium for that work. And that goes on, authentically engaging youth, but also respecting their experience and their input, instead of, so often what we see is organizations using young people by the numbers, like having boots on the ground, come to this protest, come to this event, do this thing. But they're not given a seat at the table, and they're not valued as an expert in their experience, right? And so that's what I would say as far as, increasing engagement with young people, is really just making sure you meet them where they're at and being authentic, and creating space for their experiences and working alongside rather than working over or telling them what they should be doing or what they should be feeling. Yeah.
That's so incredibly put. I think it's really interesting. I feel like people now are growing up in this, so it's like an era of unparalleled nihilism. And I feel like, I'm seeing that kind of reflected in my own experiences growing up, where even now, out of college, working a job, when I either, meet a new organization I might work with or something, my first initial reaction is skepticism. It's what do you want from me? And so I think you put that so incredibly well. And it's incredible that the goal here is to really give younger folks a place at the table and kind of validate their experiences. I think that's so important. And I think authenticity is such a great piece of advice there. That's awesome. So I do want to turn it over to the audience for some questions in our last few minutes here. We do have one question that's come in already. So what are some things that you do for youth who either aren't in campuses or, on campuses, sorry, rather, or in college?
Right. So I think, I think that's a great question. And so many organizations that do youth engagement, I guess the almost easiest first levels is college campuses, because there's like an institution to operate within, right? To like, there's student groups and things like that. And that is definitely easy. We do a lot of work with young people who are not on college campuses, who are not in school. And so again, though, connecting with institutions is helpful. So we work with a lot of community-based organizations, LGBT centers, health clinics, various kind of service-based organizations, as well as so community-based organizations. So there are kind of connections there that we can do some work with. But also, I will say social media is kind of this platform in which 10 years ago, we always had to kind of reach out to the institutions, the student clubs, the organizations, and now we can open up our application process to and be able to reach more young people. And I think specifically if you're trying to target and or want to have folks that aren't in school, explicitly saying that in any of your outreach or your applications. And so often I think young people are used to there's the privilege aspect of people who are in school, right? And so if you're 19 years old and you are not in college, but you want to do work, you feel as if your things are only available if you're in college or if you're in school. And so explicitly saying, that this isn't just for college students, or looking for folks who aren't connected to campuses, and being explicit about the experiences and the folks that you're trying to do outreach to. And so, yeah, I think connecting with organizations, after school programs, and then just broadly kind of, gaining some traction on media platforms to reach those who aren't necessarily in school.
That's awesome. Then that's great. Yeah, I think it's so important, especially now, because college isn't necessarily the path everyone's going down.
Mhm.
Knowing sort of that it's still open for you and your voice is still valuable. That's very important. And I'm curious, I think the pandemic has just been such a shock to the system for so many young people. It's like you're 16 years old and one of those years is just gone in lockdown. Um, with the younger folks that you're working with, have you seen any sort of shifts in behavior and kind of shifts in, I guess, a desire to get involved with their community as the pandemic's hit?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I would say that, when the pandemic started, and our staff that worked more directly with young people were, kind of sharing what they were hearing and what's been going on. Obviously, so many young people are one in that scenario you're talking about, like a year of my life is gone, right? Um, but there was also a lot of issues around like safety and community that were coming up, right? So young people who were in the college in dorms, for instance, had to leave their dorms, and maybe they are um, LGBT identified but not out to their families, but then were forced to go back home to their families or are in unstable housing. Um, Situations like that. And so comfort and safety were huge issues that came up with our young folks. And that led to, a real desire to build community, and to be there for one another. And so, even with our youth conference, I was, kind of surprised how we had like 150 young people pretty active for like multiple days in a row. And what we found is, because we had created a space, a virtual space, but a space for young people who were, LGBT identified, youth of color, um, uh, who were HIV positive, who had abortion experiences, right? They were finding other people who were like them, who had similar experiences as them, and they felt a connection. And so they continued to participate and even like join our virtual dance parties and things like that during the conference. And what we're finding more and more is that, that isolation that young people are feeling, while we can engage on social media and like make amazing TikTok content. But that engagement with each other and that isolation, just being at home for like a year or losing a year, that we found that a lot of our young people are really looking to create community and support one another. So whether it's these kind of Zoom gatherings or whether it's other kind of ways, if I'm a young LGBT, if I'm a LGBT youth and I'm at my parents' house and they're not that comfortable with my identity yet, but I'm stuck at home with them, I can connect with you via my computer maybe once a week and feel not so isolated and alone.
Right.
And that's pre-pandemic and during the pandemic. And I think you know that the spirit of mutual aid, community, and connection is really what we're seeing like young people are thriving for.
That's awesome. It's a silver lining in a pretty stark situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
We are right up against the clock. Thank you so much, Diana, for joining
Of course.
us today and sharing your insights with us. And thank you all for joining us who are on the line. We have a number of incredible sessions coming up the rest of today and tomorrow. So please stick around for those. And thank you again, Diana.
Thank you, Satya. This was so great. And thank you, everyone who joined.
Bye, everyone.